this problem hasn't really been solved until now?
I'd say in many cases, user experience has been lacking.
Do you feel like you're able to satisfy the needs of these government agencies?
To be able to build one product and run it anywhere else relies on the assumption that you can actually have very strong security and compliance posture.
Especially on the security side?
I asked other batchmates, like, what are you using? And almost everybody said Auth0. We just set all of our work to the new bar. Don't believe that the barrier to entry is higher than it actually is.
Welcome back to Demo Auth0. Today we're going to be talking to Recidiviz, which is a nonprofit organization that leverages data and software to assist criminal justice agencies in understanding and improving outcomes for justice-impacted individuals. We're here today with Joshua Essex, who is the co-founder and CTO of Recidiviz. Hi, Joshua. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Could we just start with learning a little bit more about what you do and what Recidiviz is as an actual product?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we're a tech nonprofit. We're about 6 years old, and we're today working with government agencies in 19 states. And the thing that we provide is a set of tools for the people who actually operate departments of corrections. So these are the government agencies that operate prison, parole, and probation for the most part. And they have thousands of staff in each agency who do these very complex, overwhelming jobs. You know, they all have caseloads, whether in prison or in community supervision, of dozens or sometimes north of 100 people who they're trying to help get through the system, rehabilitated back to their communities. And they're very difficult jobs, and they often have lackluster technology at their disposal. What we provide are products for the people who operate those systems that allow them to automate these workflows that they go through with every justice impacted individual to help them put justice impacted individuals onto the best and fastest and most rehabilitative path back to their communities. Today, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are, staying in prison longer than policy says they should, or who are eligible for, something like a work release program, or might be eligible for a lower custody level. And they're oftentimes not getting those opportunities as soon as they could or at all, for very technical, operational, administrative, bureaucratic reasons. There's no great reason for people to not get those opportunities as soon as they're eligible. And so our tools automate the workflows that get those opportunities in place as soon as possible.
Gotcha. And I know you talk about this as like low-hanging fruit, but it seems like this problem hasn't really been solved until now. At least not at the level that Recidiviz is working at. So could you explain to us, like, what are some of the challenges, at least from a security standpoint, that have led to this problem not being solved?
There's a lot of challenges. Security is a big part of it. It's not the only part. You get into the fact that it's a very difficult problem to scale. It's hard to do the work either deep or broad, much less both. By which I mean that every government agency has their own bespoke data systems. They often have several systems at play within even one agency. They don't really talk to one another. And so trying to provide even something as conceptually simple as like targeted workflow automations, if you want to do that in multiple states, I think most organizations have conceded the idea that, like, I'll have to build that product multiple times. And I think we had the kind of like audacious idea that, like, why? Maybe you don't have to. Maybe what you could do is do the work to universalize incoming data from government agencies so that you could build a product and run it many times. And so that leads into the security piece, which is that at its core, there's sort of like one main application entry point into all of the tools that we provide. And we provide different kinds of tools for different kinds of users within departments of corrections. But there's one main entry point. That's an application that is multi-tenant. And so there's one deployment that's being utilized across different state lines. And where the magic happens is in authentication and authorization, making sure that a user from one Department of Corrections or DOC is only seeing what they should see within their specific DOC, certainly nothing from any other DOC. So the idea to be able to build one product and run it anywhere else relies on the assumption that you can actually have very strong security and compliance posture, which I think at its core comes down to the authentication and authorization solution.
Gotcha. And what is like the origin story of the product versus how it scaled over time? How did you decide that like you needed something like Auth0 and like implementing it with people that work in governments? What did that look like?
Well, I'll start very high level and I'll come back, I promise. You know, the origin story is sort of that I have two co-founders, Clementine and Andrew, and the three of us all come from justice impacted families. So we've all had family members who are incarcerated. We've all seen what the best case, most rehabilitative path looks like. We've also seen what the worst case path looks like. And we've also seen that the difference between those two paths can hinge on very small technical operational details, not something as lofty as like this policy was in place at this time. And so we were motivated to try to provide tools that ensured that most families got the best case scenario and not the worst case scenario. So we quickly, when we started this, the idea was always, let's provide tools to the people who actually run these systems to ensure that justice impacted individuals flowing through the system were on the best and most rehabilitative path. We didn't necessarily know what those tools would need to be, but we did know that the data and the problems and the dialogue around data within the criminal justice space was a very hard problem, and that we would need to, at the very least, provide a platform that the products could sit on top of that made sense of the data in the first place. We were already working on that while we were doing the user experience research and the design work and the product work to understand what's the first tool that we will launch in the first state. Once we got to the point where we could actually start building that tool, we on like day 2, we were like, okay, so what are the authentication requirements of that first state? We also had a second state that was getting ready to sign up. So we could look at those requirements, and we could see that just the first 2 states, the authentication and authorization requirements they were asking of us were night and day. So we knew a few things. We knew that we needed to build very fast, like our hours meant survival or death as an organization, as a startup. We also knew that if the first 2 states were going to be that different, then probably the next 20 were going to be significantly different. That turned out to be true. And so what I did was I started by simply asking, other startup founders, and in particular, we were in Y Combinator's summer 2019 batch. I asked other batchmates, like, what are you using? And almost everybody said Auth0. And when I looked at the feature suite, I thought there's both enough possibility space now and clearly enough ongoing development that I think this could probably scale with us. And I feel like I was trying to mitigate the risk that I would pick something, get locked in, frankly, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, find that, I now needed some table stakes functionality that this solution wasn't going to provide. I was able to get it up and running for the first state within the first afternoon. Within 4 hours of development, I would say I had something that matched the spec of that first state, which was amazing. And in the 18 states since then, it's been able to continue to match what the next functionality requirement was going to be. So that's one of the best technical choices I made during that era, I would say.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to scale over time with it. And also just hearing about how impactful the developer community was in making your decision helps us as a company even know how much we should be investing there.
Yeah.
When you are working with people in government, what does their security, like their login infrastructure usually look like? And how are you able to use Auth0 to make sure that they're getting something that's easy to use, but also secure?
So the easy to use piece is important. It's not that people haven't been building software in these spaces. Certainly they have been, but I'd say in many cases, user experience has been lacking. And so you have both a number of like very talented and devoted government staff who are like now kind of conditioned to using software that maybe like is not the best user experience, and also in some cases feel like they're drowning in software. I'm using like 7 or 8 different tools. You want me to use another thing? And so it very much needs to feel like, from our perspective, from the Recidiviz perspective, like you're not being asked to like do one more thing, remember one more username, password, credential set. And so what we've been able to do in nearly all of the agencies that we partner with is just integrate directly into their SSO solution. Now that's easier said than done. If we work in 19 government agencies today, there's probably like somewhere between 12 and 15 different SSO solutions. There's not a lot of commonality. Having said that, the thing that Auth0 has been very helpful with is several of those solutions are first party out of the box integrations, pretty easy to set up. There's also the ability to like drop down to lower like SAML assertions and like configure the SSO yourself. And we've been able to pull that off in a number of agencies as well. And so that's really the killer feature for us, is that we've been able to have this multi-tenant application that can guide staff from different government agencies to their own SSO solution for authentication, and then you do the authorization to make sure that people are actually only getting access to the specific content they should be getting access to. It's hard for me to imagine that we're going to see a new kind of SSO requirement that Auth0 is not going to be able to support at this point. So I've been pleased with that.
That's great, knowing that you're able to use a product that you don't have to then rip out like in a few years, and you can actually stick it in. You don't have to worry about it for as long as your product continues to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you're able to satisfy the needs of these government agencies where your product is at today, especially on the security side?
I think that the short answer is yes. I mean, knock on wood, like you're always, as a startup founder, especially for something that does work with sensitive data, one of the things that keeps you up at night is the possibility of any kind of security breach. Fortunately, we have avoided that through our first 6 years of existence. But I think the reason I feel an appropriate level of confidence is that our strategy from a compliance perspective has been sort of like all of the above, by which I mean, in any kind of government agency contract or services agreement or data sharing request, there will be a unique set of requirements, but there tend to be the similar shapes. So, every government agency will have some kind of data retention requirement. They'll all have some kind of password complexity requirement. They'll all have some kind of this or that. And our approach has been, every time we partner with another government agency, we break down all the security and compliance requirements. And where they have something that is now like the new bar, we just set all of our work to the new bar. So whoever has the most stringent retention policy, that's the new policy for Recidiviz. Whoever has the most stringent policy around different aspects of password complexity, that's the new policy, And so we're kind of accustomed to having a very large regulatory and compliance footprint, and accustomed to this idea that like we will set ourselves to whatever is the largest standard in the agencies that we're working with. Again, that does require that the key technology that we're building on top of, like Auth0, can continue to scale with that, which requires that like the event horizon of functionality that the tool provides continues to expand over time and stays ahead of you. But so far that has been true.
That's great. You said something earlier that I'm going to use as a quote everywhere I go. It was something about how earlier on hours meant like survival or death or something like that, right? Yeah. When we're talking about things like engineering productivity, how do tools like Auth0 play into your day-to-day like development cycles? What are the value that they're adding there, outside of just making things faster to use?
Yeah. I have an opinionated stance on this, and I think people watching this video could be like, he's a charlatan. Don't listen to him. That's fine. From my perspective, if what you are doing is building a lean organization that has a specific mission that you are in pursuit of, as opposed to, like building technology for the sake of like other technology organizations. From my perspective, a good proxy for how productive the engineering organization is how much time are my engineers spending thinking about the actual domain problems, as opposed to problems of uptime and security and compliance constraints. And it's another way to put it is I really like to use fully managed services wherever possible, because I want my engineers thinking about how does this tool accelerate people through this part of the system one day faster, as opposed to how do I squeeze a fifth night of uptime out of this particular part of our platform. We've leaned very heavily into fully managed services. It has allowed a very small engineering team to accomplish what I think is a much larger functionality footprint and client footprint and impact footprint than we probably have any rights to believe we could accomplish at this size. And I think Auth0 has played a role in that, in that, I've not needed to set up an entire team that is focused on rolling an authentication and authorization solution and then like updating it every time we sign a new government agency as a partner. I've been able to encapsulate and centralize the knowledge within a couple of domain experts on the team as part of the rest of their jobs. It's not like a major time sink for us.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I love that you talk about sort of showing your team and like getting them to see the impact that has on their product and their customers, everything. Do you have any advice for startups or other founders that are working in GovTech and building products like this?
A lot of advice, probably. Like, send me an email and I'll tell you what not to do. If there's a mistake, I've probably made it. I think a couple of things that come to mind that are related. One is I believe that a lot of people care deeply about public institutions and have a lot of like very good ideas for how those institutions could better serve the citizens that they're trying to serve. And I think a lot of ideas never even become the first step. They never get off the ground. Nobody even tries to implement them because there's this pervasive notion that working with government agencies is so painful that it's not worth the squeeze, essentially. I think that's wrong. And I believe that if like our team can be working with government agencies, criminal justice agencies, no less, in 19 different states, we're not that special. If our team can do it, you can start an organization that does it as well. So encapsulating that, don't believe that the barrier to entry is higher than it actually is. Like, just start, and you can probably find a way in. That's one. I think the second one is, and this is more timely, right now we're living in a time of, I'd say fair, increased attention and scrutiny of the efficiency of these government institutions. But the thing to keep in mind is that institutions exist to serve people. Every institution has some kind of subset of the population that they're trying to help with some outcome. And so if you are working in GovTech, just understand what is the outcome that this institution is trying to serve, because that's the outcome that you should be trying to serve. And I think if you keep that mission alignment such that the citizen, the institution, and the GovTech startup organization are all, looking in the same direction and trying to row in the same direction, then I think you can avoid a lot of misalignment mistakes that a lot of organizations get caught on.
Awesome. That's really great advice. And like I said before, I'm going to be quoting you all over the place from now on. Thank you so much for joining us, Joshua. I just want to say cheers to an incredible platform that you built with your team and the work that you're doing. And if anyone's interested in using Auth0, you can start building for free today or join the startup program if you're ready to launch. Thank you so much for joining it, and let us know if you have any questions.
Take care.